Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Connecting Conversation. This week we are talking to Brandon Robbins. So thanks for coming, Brandon. Can you tell us a little bit about where you work, what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, thanks first of all for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to some up and coming leaders in our region. As a MPA student myself, who got a master's with a focus in nonprofit management, it's kind of cool being able to share what I do every day. So I am the executive director of Ginny's Helping Hand. We're a nonprofit located in Leominster, Massachusetts. We focus mainly on food insecurity. But as we were kind of talking about previous to this recording, I think we do it in a really unique way, and I'm excited to talk about that.
So, to get into it a little bit, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up at Ginny's? In the frame of, I think a lot of our students are realizing in here that you can run a nonprofit without being the person who founded it. That's
Hmm.
sort of what's happening in most of these conversations. So, the path that got you here and what you walked into.
Yeah, I would actually encourage like not founding a nonprofit if you can avoid it, just because there's so many organizations that are doing amazing work, and oftentimes it's really hard to find good people to step into those roles. So kind of trying to find a place where you're passionate about your work, I think is really important. My road to where I am today was a little bit windy, I guess I'll say. When I graduated high school, I thought I wanted to be a teacher, so I actually went to Keene State for 2 years, and realized that, oh, I'm not going to make a lot of money being a teacher and have to work a lot of crazy hours. Um, so I thought like chemistry would be a good idea. So I transferred to UMass Lowell and did one semester of that and was like, oh, this really is not for me. So that's when I listened to the people who were around me, and I actually got a bachelor's degree in political science. I've always been passionate about politics, American politics specifically. Um, and at that time, that's actually when I got involved with Ginny's. I started as a volunteer. That was back in 2017. Just coming in and helping out. And the executive director at the time kind of mentioned that they were looking for somebody. So I actually just stepped into a kind of general food pantry support role. Um, and UMass Lowell had actually also just launched the MPA program as kind of a fifth year option. And I liked the work I was doing at Ginny's, so I figured why not, get a master's here. It's only an extra year of work, and I can focus on nonprofit management. So that's what I did. I still had the passion for politics though, so during that time I actually left Ginny's to go work for the state rep in Fitchburg, which was a great experience. But during the second year I was there, the executive director of Ginny's called me and said, "Look, I'm looking to step away from the day-to-day operations and kind of focus on my family a little bit more. And we'd love to have you step into the role. And is it something would be interested in?" So I've been in this role as the executive director for 3 years now, and I've loved every minute of it. I get to go home every day knowing I'm making a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, awesome. I know, I think what the students are actually going to also realize throughout this course is how connected we all are in this bubble. And I really do think that's unique to North Central Massachusetts. But if for any of the students here, you take grant writing and fundraising with me, you will hear from State Representative Kushmerek, because I interviewed him for one of these for that class. And that is one of the ways I got connected to Brandon. But secondary to that, Brandon, I, and Julie from the Gardner CAC, who you also hear from, are all a part of the United Way. And we met in groups there. And again, if you're in the grant writing and fundraising class too, you hear from Megan, who's part of the Community Foundation, who joins us in those groups. So we, like Brandon said, all fill a need in the community. And so instead of creating something new, we stepped into what existed that we were passionate about. And then we all sort of work together in general support of everybody in the area, which I think is super cool and would encourage anybody going into this field to try and recreate that in your community because it's really helpful. Um, so can you tell us a little bit about how Ginny's operates between the clothing store and the food and the other things that you do there?
Yeah, so I mentioned that we kind of operate this pretty unique model. So when I think when people, think about nonprofits, it's just like this service that they provide. But one thing that you, as students, will realize really quickly is like money is really hard to come by in the nonprofit world. And I think it's great that you're also teaching a grants and fundraising class because like that work is critical to making your nonprofit thrive.
Mhm.
Um, but in addition to that, and this gets to the question of how does Ginny's operate? So Ginny's operates a food pantry. We're open Tuesday through Friday, 10 to 5, Saturday, 9 to 4, because some of our, or most of our clients actually, like 50%, actually are employed. So, like, we want to make sure that we're accessible to everybody that needs our services. But to supplement that, we also run a thrift store. So what we do is we take in donations from the community of gently used or new clothing. We go through everything and then we sell them at really low cost. From like nothing is more than like $10. So it's really meant to be accessible to everybody, and we want everybody to come in and shop, right? Because every dollar that gets spent in our thrift store supports our food pantry. Um, and that gives us a source of earned income that, at least there's some money that we can count on that we're not necessarily fighting for in the same way that we are in the grant space. In addition to the food pantry and the thrift store, we do operate some like smaller basic needs services as well. We provide people kind of through the pantry with hygiene products and baby food and, baby supplies, diapers, wipes, that kind of stuff. But we also do offer assistance with temporary emergency shelter. So, people who find themselves in emergency situations, domestic violence, fires, floods, unfortunately have been something that Leominster had to deal with.
Yeah.
Um, we place people temporarily in motels to kind of help them start getting on a path back to some sense of normalcy. And then the thrift store does allow us to provide emergency assistance as well. So if people are in need of clothing, similarly, kind of with those same emergency situations, we will donate clothes to them as well.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, it is. It's a complicated model, but it does really all piece together. And generally, if you're finding people need help with food security, there are other things they need help with. So to be a resource for them is really helpful. In terms of the operational, how that all works, can you talk to us about how many staff you have at Ginny's, what those roles are, and how you support each of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like most nonprofits will tell you, they're really small staff
Mhm.
sizes. We operate with 5 staff, 2 of which are full-time, the rest are part-time. And then really how we get all the work done is with our amazing volunteers. Not that my staff isn't amazing because they are incredibly and equally amazing.
Mhm.
Um, but without our volunteers, the day to day and the level of service that we provide just wouldn't be able to happen. So we have probably about 20 what we call core volunteers. These are people who come in every single week, at a specific time and a specific day and pretty much do the same thing every time they're here. Because a lot of what we do is kind of repetitive in nature we need the same sort of things kind of on the day to day, which is really great for our volunteers because first of all, I think volunteers do like the kind of consistency in that. And they know that they can sign up and continue to be needed instead of just maybe like a one-time need. Um, so yeah, that's really how we get the work done. And then my staff kind of really is on the front lines doing the client facing work. And that can be really heavy. So the supports that you talked about, that's kind of or part of the role that I try to play is where can I step in to kind of either take some of that off their shoulders or make sure they feel supported in whatever their role is.
Yeah, I think all of us at these small to mid-sized nonprofits, I get asked a lot in the class, so what do you do each day? Well, it's really different because some days, like the admin assistant calls out sick, and guess what? I'm sitting at the front desk for a couple hours because we just have to. There isn't
Right.
enough
Right.
staff. But there's other days where I lock myself in my office for 3 hours and write a grant that's 20 pages long. And it varies based on the need. So your role is sort of what does it need to keep the ship floating? Um,
Yeah, and I would encourage just as you think about the nonprofit world to like keep that in mind. There is a real big, at least in the small nonprofit world, I guess I should
Mhm.
say. Um, there are going to be days where you're on the front lines doing the client facing work. There are going to be days where you're behind the scenes and you don't talk to anybody all day because you got to get that 20-page grant in. And if
Mhm.
somebody talks to you, it's not going to happen by the 5 o'clock deadline.
Right.
So but I think that's what makes the work fun is
Yes.
like there is never a day where I feel like, oh, here we go again. I'm doing the same thing I did yesterday.
Mhm.
Um, I don't want to be, sitting on a assembly line putting the same piece into the puzzle. I think I get to put many pieces into the puzzle and like be the glue that kind of holds it all together.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what keeps it interesting and keeps you invested in it too. Um,
Hmm.
the other side of this, I think that really isn't in like the job description, but becomes part of the job is the amount of community engagement we do outside of the organization, being a part of community groups and networking groups and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about outside of Ginny's? What are some of the meetings or groups or things like that that you participate in, not just to get the word out about Ginny's, but to embed yourselves in the community.
Yeah, I think this is something that like I never would have expected in the role. Like
Mhm.
nobody tells you about this kind of work, and I think it's really cool that you're bringing it up here because honestly, it's again some of the most fun work that I get to do. That's obviously, like you said, how we were able to meet, but it's also how like our region has gotten so close and I think so effective at the work that we're doing. Um, I think that in recent years, the United Way of North Central Mass has really been the hub of that important work, bringing us together on numerous fronts from ways to better address food insecurity and getting food to food pantries in the region, but
Mhm.
also like how do we bring more money into this region because we don't have access to the funds that like Boston and Greater Boston has. Um, but in addition to that, I end up doing a lot of work with the state
Mhm.
legislatures and our local elected government. Because not only do go to them when I have issues with funding or am looking for funding, but they also can be on the forefront of fixing a lot of the systemic problems that exist in the work that you and I are doing every single day. So I think it sometimes can be an intimidating part of the job, but it really is a critical part of the job because, um, I think, part of what I've done is to help to kind of enhance that relationship that Ginny's has with the community. And it not only makes, the kind of everyday person help better understand what you do and who you are, but it
Mhm.
also helps the people that are in decision-making roles
Right.
better understand what you do and know who you are and be more likely to think when there's money available,
Mhm.
oh, Ginny's is the person I want to give this money to because I know they're going to use it in a way that is effective.
Yeah, I think that advocacy part of the job is not something I just had no idea because this was a career change for me. And it
Mhm.
has become one of the largest aspects of the job, especially as finances get tough and money gets constrained. Um, but all of the participation, sometimes I'm sitting in meetings and I'm like, oh, get me out of here. But the side to that that you don't realize in the moment is now everybody in that meeting knows each other. So when you need help, you can reach out, right? And that goes the same with politics. If you're only calling your local government when you need something versus
Mhm.
when you have something for them, it's not a fair relationship there, right? So,
No,
for example, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's really all about partnerships.
Yeah.
Like that's what's made North Central Mass thrive is like if I need something, there are 50 other nonprofits that I can call and say, "Hey, I came into this weird
Yeah.
situation. Is it something you've encountered before?" But like then they also know if they step into, something similar, they can call me and say, "How did you navigate this?"
Yeah.
And you know it's important because we are such small teams and like oftentimes our 5-person staff doesn't have all the answers.
Yeah. I think the other part of that has been really important that I would encourage anybody getting into this field to do in terms of relationship building is, I spent 20 years working in public higher education, which meant when there was a problem in my office, there were 500 employees at the college, and you could go plop into someone's office and figure it out. Here, there's I have 20 people, you have 5 people and 20 volunteers. And there's nobody at your equivalent level to
Mhm.
just go problem solve with. So if you don't get to connect with other executive directors or nonprofit leaders in your area, you don't have that sounding box that is really crucial, because we don't know what we're doing any more than anybody else. We're just figuring out like what is the right thing to do and doing our best at it.
Mhm.
Um, can you tell me in our last couple of minutes here about how or if at all, your political endeavors affect your work at Ginny's? Because you are city council as well, right?
Yeah, I'm a at-large member of the Leominster City Council. So I guess that this is a really important conversation for anybody who has any political aspirations or even if you like enjoy politics. The balance between politics and nonprofit management is weird.
Yeah.
It's weird because there are state and federal laws that dictate it. So like I cannot use Ginny's to politically benefit myself.
Mhm.
And neither can anyone else. So like my volunteers can't, former board members or former executive director, anybody. So where it gets weird, though, is kind of the intersection that running a nonprofit kind of inherently has with the political world. We were talking about earlier kind of the necessity to be talking with your legislators, your state rep, your state senator, and even further up. So it does get a little bit murky, and oftentimes, even where it gets a little bit more murky, is those state leaders often want to come see the work you're doing.
Yeah.
Um, and it's oftentimes fun in an election year where you have not only the person who is holding the seat, but maybe an opponent who wants to come. And you
Mhm.
kind of have to give them an opportunity, even though your political beliefs may align with one more than the other. So when I come to Ginny's, I do my very best to leave my political beliefs at the door,
Mhm.
um, because, you know, I'm here to do what's best for the organization and the people that I serve. Inherently, sometimes in public settings, it's kind of hard to take that political hat off, um,
Mhm.
just because people see you a certain way. They know you as their city councilor, or they know you as the executive director of Ginny's. Um,
Mhm.
so it's definitely a difficult space, but it's definitely maneuverable. I feel I know we're here to talk about nonprofit management,
Mhm.
but would encourage people to be involved in any way they feel because it will be important to your role.
Yeah, it is intertwined whether you want it to be or not. I've become very good friends with State Rep Zlotnick, who actually is also an instructor in this program because that's how small this whole world is. And one of the things that I tell him all the time is like, I wanted nothing to do with politics. And there is not a day that I do not talk to somebody in some form of office from city council all the way up to I have a meeting with Senator Warren's office next week, right? Like never in my wildest dreams I just wanted to like house some people and do some good work and I just had no idea. So I do think it's important. Whoops, I'm timing our conversation here. I do think it's important that students realize nonprofit work is inevitably slightly political just because you have to advocate for your organization across all political parties,
Mhm.
right? It's not political in that you're trying to sway votes or that you're choosing one side or another. It's political in that you have to work with all sides. Uh,
Yeah, and you're gonna inevitably probably have to work with someone you disagree
yes.
with. But remember that you are the representative of that organization, and they can be a serious lifeline for you, even if you disagree with them. I don't know how much you've talked about the amazing housing project that you're doing.
A
Um,
little.
but but I believe that you could totally have got that done with a total opposite party because it's good work for veterans in our community.
Yeah, yeah, it is one of those things where, even we flipped well in my time here from a Democratic senator to a Republican senator. Doesn't matter, got to work with both
Mhm.
because there's work to be done, and they'll both work with you. That's literally their job, right?
Right.
As long as you approach it correctly. All right, so in our last few minutes here, is there any other message or info that you think would be helpful to share, or anything you would encourage students to do as they go along this path?
I think that the only advice I'd give is kind of find the issue that you're passionate about. There are so many nonprofit spaces to kind of step into that it can be really overwhelming. And this one just kind of fell in my lap as what I became passionate about. Um,
Mhm.
so, as much as in addition to, finding something you're passionate about, keep your opportunities open. Like, you may think that like, oh man, homelessness and housing, that's so hard right now because, the housing stock is low and the
Mhm.
costs are so high. Um, but it may be something you're really good at. It may be something you love. So, keep your opportunities open and just, I think it's hard, this is such a specific field that I don't think people think about it as a career choice, especially because nobody is getting rich in doing this work, especially in small nonprofit work. So it's really encouraging that you have a class full of students who are ready to step into these leadership roles, um, because there also oftentimes is not a really good pipeline of
Yeah.
people to kind of be in a succession plan.
Yeah, I think that for most of us, we didn't anticipate where we are, but we're exactly where we need to be. And that's a pretty cool career to land on. So I hope that for all the students in the class too. So for those of you at the class, that's the end of this conversation, which means you've got 3 questions below to respond to and to respond to at least 2 students. And if you need or anything else or have any follow-up questions about what we discussed, leave those below too. So thank you so much, Brandon. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, and I wish all of your students good luck.
Thank you.